This morning we light the 4 candles of Advent, invoking hope, peace, joy, and love for the coming of Christmas. We light our chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, and we light all 8 candles of the menorah to light the light against darkness and to honor the enduring spirit of the Jewish people. In this congregation, we walk many wisdom pathways. May these flames remind us that regardless of which path we choose, we must do our part to bring light back into the world. Our first story this morning is a wonderful fairy tale from Iceland called Hild, Queen of the Elves. I chose it because the central problem in the story is that life is frozen. Not so much time itself, but internal development, which is symbolized in the recurrence of a problem on Christmas Eve. The story offers us some key lessons on what is needed for transformation to take place, to fix time, and get the flow of life moving again. Hild, Queen of the Elves, told by Amanda Mack.
There was a farmer who had no wife, but a very capable and industrious housekeeper named Hild. No one knew where she came from. Everything went well on the farm, except that every year on Christmas Eve, the shepherd died. He was always found in his bed, dead, the following morning. On Christmas Eve, everybody on the farm went to church. It was a long journey, and they left at midday to return at night. As a rule, however, they arrived home earlier than the shepherd, who had to stay out very late. Besides him, Hild also remained at the farm, watching it and getting everything ready for the Christmas celebration. She too was often up even later on this night than the churchgoers. Because of the regular death of the shepherd at this time, the farmer decided not to hire any more shepherds. His flock would just have to get along as best it could. Then a strong, cheerful man came to the farm and offered his services as shepherd. The farmer warned him of the fate of the other shepherds, but he had heard the story and was not afraid. So he was hired and proved to be a capable man, and all went well for a while. The next Christmas Eve, as usual, the farm people went off to church. The shepherd went to bed before they returned, but even though he was tired, he kept himself awake. He heard everyone come back and go to bed. Then, a little later, Hild came into his room. While he pretended to be asleep, she put a bridle on his face. Then she rode him like a horse out across the fields and up to a ditch in the earth. She jumped off him onto a stone and vanished into the ditch. The shepherd discovered that he was bewitched and incapable of movement so long as the bridle was on. So he rubbed it off on the stone and then jumped into the ditch himself. He could see Hild ahead, walking over pleasant meadows. He thought how much more cunning she really was than one would have suspected. To avoid being seen, he took from his pocket a small stone which made him invisible, and he concealed it in his left hand. Hild approached a great hall out of which a crowd of people came to meet her. Her husband and their 2 half-grown children came up to her. Hild and her husband now proved to be the king and queen. They were led into the hall, and Hild was dressed in royal garments with beautiful gold rings on her arms. The shepherd went into the hall where he stood invisible and watched Hild take her place beside the king at a banquet more magnificent than any he had ever seen. They all danced and enjoyed themselves while the royal pair presided. 3 very young children came up to Hild, who showed them great affection. She took the baby on her lap, and when it became restless, gave it one of the rings from her arm. The child dropped it, and the shepherd quickly picked it up and concealed it. Then Hild, against the entreaties of everyone, said she must leave, for the night was almost over. The king turned to his mother, an ugly old woman, and begged her to take back her curse on Hild, but the woman refused. So Hild said that she must go, but that she hoped the deaths which she had been forced to cause would soon be explained, and she herself punished for them, even though they were not her fault. The shepherd ran ahead to the ditch and waited for Hild, who mounted and rode him back sadly to the farm. He pretended to be asleep till she put him to bed, and then he went to sleep himself. The next morning, the farmer was thankful to find the shepherd alive. The shepherd related to everyone as a dream all the events of the night. Hild said, "It's a lie. You must prove it." The shepherd showed the ring he had picked up. Hild thanked God, for now her mother-in-law's curse was dissolved. And then she told everyone her story. She had been a common elf maiden whom the king had married against his mother's will, and his mother had promised that they would spend little time together. Hild must be a servant with human beings and must every Christmas cause the death of a man by riding him when she visited her husband. When her evil was discovered, Hild would be killed, unless a man should appear who was so courageous as to go with her to the elves' home and bring back proof that he had seen what went on there. She now begged forgiveness for the deaths she had caused, because no one before had ever found the subterranean way and penetrated out of curiosity into the house of the mountain sprites. The shepherd had released her, and she would reward him. Now she longed to go home, and she left and was never again seen by man. In the spring, the shepherd married and settled down in his own home, for the farmer was generous. Everyone round about came to the shepherd for advice and to offer assistance. He was so well beloved, in spite of all his good fortune, that people could not understand it. Everything went fabulously well for him, but the shepherd knew that he had Queen Hild to thank for this. Here ends the story.
There's a light that's inside that I'm not gonna hide, 'cause that light will make the embers ignite, and the light that's in me will forever be. I will carry the Lux eterna, eterna, the light inside of me. Lux eterna, eterna, will shine eternally.
The Selfish Giant by Oscar Wilde. Every afternoon as they were coming home from school, the children used to go and play in the giant's garden. It was a large, lively garden with soft green grass. Here and there over the grass stood beautiful flowers like stars, and there were 12 peach trees that in the springtime broke out into delicate blossoms of pink and pearl, and in the autumn bore rich fruit. The birds sat on the trees and sang so sweetly that the children used to stop their games in order to listen to them. "How happy we are," they cried together. One day, the giant came back. He had been to visit his friend, the Cornish ogre, and had stayed with him for 7 years. And after the 7 years were over, he had said all that he had to say, for his conversation was limited, and he determined to return home to his castle. When he arrived, he saw the children playing in the garden.
What are you doing here?
He cried in a very gruff voice, and the children ran away.
My own garden is my own garden. Anyone can understand that. And I will allow nobody to play in it but myself.
So he built a high wall all around it and put up a notice board. Trespassers will be prosecuted. He was a very selfish giant. The poor children had now nowhere to play. They tried to play on the road, but the road was very dusty and full of hard stones, and they did not like it. They used to wander around the high walls when their lessons were over and talk about the beautiful garden inside. How happy we were there, they said to each other. Then the spring came, and all over the country there were little blossoms and little birds. Only in the garden of the selfish giant was it still winter. The birds did not care to sing in it, as there were no children, and the trees forgot to blossom. Once a beautiful flower put its head out from the grass, but when it saw the notice board, it was so sorry for the children that it slipped back in the ground and went off to sleep. The only people who were pleased were the snow and the frost.
Spring's forgotten this garden,
They cried.
so we will live here all year round.
The snow covered up the grass with her great white cloak, and the frost painted all the trees silver. Then they invited the north wind to stay with them, and he came. He was wrapped in furs, and he roared all day about the garden and blew the chimney pots down.
This is a delightful spot, he said. We must ask the hail on a visit.
So the hail came. Every day for 3 hours he rattled on the roof of the castle till he broke most of the slates, and then he ran round and round the garden as fast as he could go. He was dressed in gray, and his breath was like ice.
I cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming. I hope there will be a change in the weather,
said the selfish giant, as he sat at the window and looked out at his cold white garden. But the spring never came, nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden, but to the giant's garden she gave none.
He's too selfish,
She said. So it was always winter there, and the north wind and the hail and the frost and the snow danced about through the trees. One morning the giant was lying awake in bed when he heard some lovely music. It sounded so sweet to his ears that he thought it must be the king's musicians passing by. It was really only a little linnet singing outside his window, but it was so long since he heard a bird sing in his garden that it seemed to him to be the most beautiful music in the world. Then the hail stopped dancing over his head, and the north wind ceased roaring, and a delicious perfume came to him through the open casement.
I believe spring has come at last,
said the giant, and he jumped out of bed and looked out. What did he see? He saw a most wonderful sight. Through a little hole in the wall, the children had crept in, and they were sitting in the branches of the trees. In every tree that he could see, there was a little child, and the trees were so glad to have the children back again that they had covered themselves with blossoms and were waving their arms gently above and twittering with delight. And the flowers were looking up through the green grass and laughing. It was a lovely scene, only in one corner it was still winter. It was the farthest corner of the garden, and in it was standing a little boy. He was so small that he could not reach up to the branches of the tree, and he was wandering all around it, crying bitterly. The poor tree was still covered with frost and snow, and the north wind was blowing and roaring above it. "Climb up, little boy," said the tree, and it bent its branches down as low as it could. But the boy was too tiny, and the giant's heart melted as he looked out.
How selfish I have been. Now I know why the spring would not come here. I will put the poor little boy on the top of the tree, and then I will knock down the wall, and my garden shall be the children's playground forever and ever.
He was really sorry for what he had done. So he crept downstairs and opened the front door quite softly and went out into the garden. But when the children saw him, they were so frightened that they all ran away, and the garden became winter again. Only the little boy didn't run, for his eyes were so full of tears that he did not see the giant coming. And the giant stole up behind him and took him gently in his hand and put him into the tree. And the tree broke at once into blossom. The birds came and sang on it, and the little boy stretched out his 2 arms and flung them around the giant's neck and kissed him. And the other children, when they saw that the giant was not wicked any longer, came running back, and with them came the spring.
"It is your garden now, little children,"
said the giant. And he took a great axe and knocked down the wall. And when people were going to market at 12 o'clock, they found the giant playing with the children in the most beautiful garden they had ever seen. All day long they played, and in the evening they came to the giant to bid him goodbye.
"But where is your little companion, the boy I put into the tree?"
The giant loved him best because he had kissed him, and
We don't know,
answered the children.
he has gone away.
"You must tell him to be sure and come tomorrow."
Said the giant, but the children said that they did not know where he lived and had never seen him before. And the giant felt sad. Every afternoon when the school was over, the children came and played with the giant, but the little boy whom the giant loved was never seen again. The giant was kind to all the children, yet he longed for his first little friend and often spoke of him.
"How I would like to see him again."
He used to say. Years went over, and the giant grew very old and feeble. He could not play about anymore, so he sat in a huge armchair and watched the children at their games and admired his garden.
"I have many beautiful flowers, but the children are the most beautiful flowers of all."
One winter morning, he looked out of his window as he was dressing. He did not hate the winter now, for he knew that it was merely the spring asleep and that the flowers were resting. Suddenly, he rubbed his eyes in wonder and looked. It certainly was a marvelous sight. In the farthest corner of the garden was a tree quite covered with lovely white blossoms. Its branches were golden and silver. Fruit hung down from them, and underneath it stood the little boy he had loved. Downstairs ran the giant in great joy and out into the garden. He hastened across the grass and came near to the child. And when he came quite close, his face grew red with anger.
"Who hath dared to wound thee?"
He said, For on the palms of the child's hands were the prints of 2 nails, and the prints of 2 nails were on their feet.
"Who hath dared to wound thee? Tell me that I may take my big sword and slay him."
Nay, answered the child, but these are the wounds of love.
"Who art thou?"
asked the giant, and a strange awe fell on him, and he knelt before the little child. The child smiled on the giant and said to him, "You let me play once in your garden. Today you shall come with me and play in my garden, which is paradise." And when the children ran in that afternoon, they found the giant lying dead under the tree, all covered with white blossoms. Here ends the story.
The 2 stories we've heard this morning are both about inner and outer transformation that takes place around this time of year. In both, something was stuck, frozen in winter, or trapped by a Christmas Eve curse. And in both, the mechanism of transformation through which a sense of inner time and outer time are restored begins with the moment of full acceptance, a full acknowledgement of the problem. The giant looked out his window expecting spring, wondering why the weather wouldn't change, but the spring couldn't come because he hadn't changed. The garden was stuck because his heart was stuck, frozen. And then one morning he saw that little boy, too small to reach the branches, crying, and the giant's heart melted. "How selfish I have been," he said. "Now I know why the spring would not come here." So that's the pivot, right? Not when he built the wall or posted his sign or anything else, but when he finally saw and really understood the impact of his selfishness on the world. It is his Scrooge moment, much like Ebenezer Scrooge's transformation in Dickens' A Christmas Carol. So the story of the selfish giant offers its meaning to us quite directly. Oscar Wilde tells it with a kind of moral self-awareness. The giant sees his selfishness, names it, repents of it, and the transformation follows. The lesson is explicit and conscious. But the first story that we heard, Hild, Queen of the Elves, is very different. It's an older fairy tale, shaped long before modern psychology and moral reflection as we know it. It is not self-aware of its own meaning in the same way. Instead, its truth is carried symbolically beneath the surface and must be interpreted. But by point of comparison, we can see that it is in the acknowledgement by the farmer when he finally admits out loud that something is terribly wrong on his farm and that he should not hire any more shepherds doomed to die every Christmas Eve, that allows for the magic of transformation to begin, though the whole process is much more complex. I myself rely on the good work of the Jungians for my fairy tale analysis, and in this case today, the good work of the analyst David Hart, who wrote about this fairy tale in his book, The Water of Life, Spiritual Renewal in the Fairy Tale. Hart makes the point that the farmer likely took his time in coming to accept the problem because the cost of admitting the issue is huge. No more protection of his flock. We don't see the costs of admitting fault so much in the story of the selfish giant, but in real life, the costs are there in almost all circumstances. Otherwise, we would just go ahead and change internally. In explaining the meaning of Hild's story, David Hart speaks of a real patient of his in psychotherapy who was fully focused on others in all of her relationships. She was unable to express anger or even to connect with her own desires for her life in any real way. Then finally, perhaps through the help of the therapy, one night she got up and confronted herself. She saw that fear, the fear of not pleasing others, of not being acceptable, was at her core. The moment of her inner confrontation and true realization of this core problem became the pivot of her entire life, and she transformed from that point onward. Hart writes, I've always stood in awe of this moment of transformation, sensing behind it some force of destiny greater and more inscrutable than almost any other. How are we ever to account for this fundamental shift which brings movement out of despair? In real life, the psychic work of becoming unstuck from one's core problems is usually much more challenging than in the story of the selfish giant. Sometimes it can take years to fully accept and own a deep psychological problem that needs solving. Using the metaphor of the stories, this is when time is frozen. And for the stories that take place at this time of year, frozen in darkness and cold. It is as if we have to muster the psychic energy to face it. We know that to fully acknowledge and to accept a problem on a deep level is to own it, and so denial is the rule of the day until that point. I've seen this in my own life, particularly in my early years. I think this is why the words of Jesus to first take the log out of your own eye and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye is still such great medicine for us today. But the moment of transformation begins with the acknowledgement of the problem. This is the same principle as the first step of the 12-step program in Alcoholics Anonymous. Although there's a second step, of course, given there as well. So we admitted we were powerless, that our lives have become unmanageable, the recognition that we're stuck, along with the acknowledgement that we need help, which leads to the second step. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. My master's thesis at Divinity School explored exactly this dynamic within the context of mindfulness-based psychotherapy and in Zen practice. The dialectic and paradox that it is only through acceptance of a psychological problem that we can change. It's a much more powerful principle than it might appear at first glance, and it lies at the heart of both the practice of meditation and mindfulness psychology. Over and over, we offer ourselves acceptance, non-judgmental awareness, not pushing away the emotions and stories that make up our inner life. We tend to fight acceptance because we see no solution coming from it. We assume acceptance will lead only to resignation or despair, as if naming the truth means giving up hope. But the stories tell us something much deeper. Despair, not so much as an end, but as a beginning. It is what happens when a false way of living finally collapses. David Hart puts it in this way: the acknowledgement and acceptance of the problem and of our lack of capacity to solve it on our own releases energy from a false investment, a clear seeing that there is no truth left in that particular way of life. With this admission, life is no longer forced or managed, but can begin to move of itself toward a truer, healthier level. This is what brings the end of winter in the stories. A rebalancing, aligning with reciprocity, generosity, the abundance the earth provides. In the story of the selfish giant, that alignment is clear and direct. Generosity returns, children come back, and the garden literally blossoms. The fairy tale of Hild does not offer such a simple moral equation, and it does not tell us outright that generosity is the answer. And yet, prosperity, joy, and fulfillment do come to the main characters. They arise not through moral correction alone, but through courage, truth-telling, and the willingness to face what had been hidden. In both stories, life begins to flow again when what is denied is finally acknowledged, and when relationship, whether with the children or with the truth of oneself, is restored. From that restored relationship, abundance, joy, and fulfillment follows, and that is what carries us toward the light of what comes next. This is the wisdom captured in the first 2 steps of the 12-step tradition. We admitted we were powerless, that our lives had become unmanageable. It is the clear recognition of where we are stuck and the honest acknowledgement that we cannot fix everything on our own. And from there comes the second step. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Not as a doctrine, but as an opening to help, to relationship, to something larger than our own will. There is mystery at work here. Call it grace, the love at the heart of the universe, or the quiet force that makes trees blossom. When we stop clinging to false security, when we accept where we are stuck and open ourselves to the powers outside of our own, transformation becomes possible. And it is this movement, from honest seeing to restored relationship to renewed life, that carries us now toward the turning of the season and the light that follows. So during this busy season of many festivals of lights, I invite you to look inside. Take a moment in the stillness. What does the darkness invite you to see within yourself this year? The darkness is not our enemy. Indeed, sometimes it is exactly what provides the space for us to see ourselves clearly. A space where we can stop performing, stop pretending, and simply be honest about who we are and where we are stuck. So may the blessings of the darkness of this season be with you. May you find time and space, silence and rest in this darkness to look inward with curiosity. May you see clearly any ways that you are stuck and discover within yourself the courage to face what needs to be faced, open to the support of the mystery. And in the great paradox of change, may we all find the acceptance that brings transformation. Amen.